What have we talked about forever with Nebraska? When they left the Big 12, they left the state of Texas behind them. Well, where has Matt Rhule already had success? The state of Texas. Where? At Baylor. So I think he is poised to win for the first time in a while. Hello and welcome in. We are just 2 days away from the Super Bowl. We hope you're as excited as we are, but of course you can tune in here. It's always college football. We understand that you guys have gotten your fill of Super Bowl coverage. We know that you guys have probably consumed some media day. We know that you've probably gotten all dialed in to all the different angles and all these other things. We debated having Fickell on to break down some prop bets just for you, but we've resisted that urge because our goal is to serve the college football audience. When everyone else is abandoning you, we are still here, okay? We're always going to be here on Always College Football. Mark Kubiak alongside Jack Foster, alongside me, Greg McElroy. Appreciate y'all being with us. Please like, rate, and subscribe. It helps us out, helps the show out. If you're on the YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button on ESPN's college football page. You can like with the thumbs up right there beneath the video. That helps us out as well. And make sure you watch as long as possible. We want to watch for at least 30, 35 times, if you don't mind. That'd be great as well. So we appreciate this. Make sure when you watch, don't watch for like 2 seconds and press reload. And we want long viewership. So we appreciate that very much. Thank you all so much for being with us. It's been awesome so far this week. We got into second-year coaches, which I thought was a lot of fun to kind of regroup, look back just a hair. We're not going to do a ton of looking back at this point, but we felt like this week, as we transition, you're starting to get into some fourth quarter programs, starting to get into some off-season programs. Let's put a bow on it. Like, guys are finalized, the Senior Bowl's in the can, like we have it all done. So we're starting to look back just a hair before we start to look forward. Now, today's show is a good way of kind of incorporating both sides of it. We're going to look back at some hires that were made, and we're going to look forward at how we think those hires will fare, at least in the early going. So we appreciate very much all the hires that have made this past off season because the carousel has been highly entertaining. Monday, we got a Dabo Sweeney's comments, so that was a lot of fun. So it's been a good week, so let's put a bow on it this week. A bow on the week right here by talking about the coaches that were hired this past cycle. We're going to assign letter grades. We already did it 2 days ago with the first-year head coaches, gave them a letter grade based on how they performed in year number one. Now we're going to look towards the coaches that are getting ready to start their first year and what we think of the hire without any further evidence of their success. So putting a letter grade on it, we're going to do that right now. So let's stop wasting some time. Let's get into some grades right now with some first-year coaches. All right, so just so you know, if you're waiting to hear about Group of 5 coaches, we will do letter grades on those guys in an episode down the road. We're not going to do that today. This is Power 5 only, and we have assigned letter grades to every hire up to this point. Now, as we referenced just a couple days ago, in case you missed the show, we don't do pluses, we don't do minuses. It's either an A, a B, a C, a D, F, what have you. Okay, we don't do the plus minus system. Why? Because it always confused me as a student, and it's going to confuse me now as we try to assess whether or not these are good. Well, the way I see it, basically A, great. All right, B, solid. C, D, F, yikes. Right? That's a kind of where we're at. That's how I would assess it. Like, I don't do the whole, well, if you get a 50, you're an F. If you get a 60, you're an F. You get a 65, you're a D. Like, I know. Like, it's basically like great, good, average, then D, and then F, yikes. Fair enough? All right, good. Now that we have the grading chart dialed in, let's get into it a little bit. Let's start with the A's, shall we? My favorite hire, as I've said already, throughout the course of the offseason, my favorite hire this cycle was Matt Rhule. Why? Because I think Nebraska really sweetened the deal for him. He said no originally. They came back to him because they were persistent. Trev Albert said, I will not take no for an answer. I'm going to get it done. And they did. Matt Rhule eventually was so blown away with the proposal that he decided to sign on the dotted line. Could not be a better situation, I think, for Nebraska to go out and get a guy that's done more with less and that has identified diamonds in the rough already in the past on the recruiting trail, did a great job at Temple, did a great job at Baylor, and will do a great job at Nebraska as well. The guy has won everywhere he's been. Now, you look at where they've been in the Big Ten, right? Kind of had some moments where they've looked okay, and then they've kind of fallen down a little bit. But we're talking about maybe the number one target on the entire list, the entire, I guess, coaching list. If you could put one together, hey, this guy's the top target. Matt Rhule was that. I think he is an A+. All right. Like I said, I don't assign pluses, but I'll assign one in this particular case because I'm so excited about the possibility of him taking what is a crazy good NIL situation, a crazy proud fan base, and the ability to now go out and recruit in the state of Texas, where he's familiar, I might add. What have we talked about forever with Nebraska? When they left the Big 12, they left the state of Texas behind them. Well, where has Matt Rhule already had success? The state of Texas. Where? At Baylor. So I think he is poised to win for the first time in a while. Now, his job's tougher than any of his predecessors. Why? Because the Big Ten will get rid of divisions. And the West has been more gettable than the East. So it will be tougher, but I still think, look at the hire, it's an A. No doubt about it. Other A's, and there's 4 of them. Okay? Luke Fickell at Wisconsin is an A. Now, I'm not sure many of us anticipated this move going down. I think Cincinnati was poised to move into the Big 12. Things felt pretty good for Cincinnati as they were making that move. They obviously have a proud program. They've already been to the playoff, but I think Fickell recognized the Big Ten is home. And with the world that's coming in college football, whether it be the SEC and the Big Ten, if they do continue to kind of distance themselves from the others, you want to be on that train. And I think Fickell recognized that, and the opportunity at Wisconsin was just too good to pass up. Plus, I love the hires he's made already. He's gone out. He's got Phil Longo. You know that he's going to do a great job of kind of reinventing this offense. He did a great job of it at North Carolina. Obviously, ton of yards, ton of talent, ton of success at North Carolina and Ole Miss previously. So you got to think that Luke Fickell going to completely reinvent the Wisconsin system. Not going to be the Wisconsin that we grew up with, but either way, I'm very optimistic with the bona fides that Luke Fickell's already created for himself, and now he gets to do so at a place with a very proud and historically significant tradition. So the Badgers, they get an A for their hire. Let's move to Louisville. You bring back one of your own, Jeff Brohm. What more could you say about Jeff Brom's tenure at Purdue? He stepped into a situation at Purdue that everyone said, man, I don't know if you can win there. Not only did he win, but he did a great job there, man. Got to a Big Ten championship game, won 9 games, did a lot for the program, and did so with solid quarterback play, a superstar at wide receiver pretty regularly, and a defense that just played their tails off. And now he goes back to a place in Louisville that's going to be a player as it relates to the NIL world. Has already done a pretty good job at times on the recruiting trail under the previous regime. And now Jeff Brohm, talk about a fun offense to play in. A guy that's going to incorporate ways of featuring his players like he did at Purdue, and is going to be able to draw up all these cool, crazy screens and all these different eye violations and things that are going to cause opposing defenses to make their head spin, essentially. So I think Jeff Brohm gets an A. His familiarity, obviously, with the school, his familiarity with the players, and the bona fides he's already created at Purdue leads me to believe that this is a home run hire. Moving on to the 4th A. Probably wondering where I'm going with this. But I wanted the dust to settle. And I waited until after signing day to officially declare all these hires, A's, B's, C's, etc. Deion Sanders is an A, y'all. Now, I'm not saying that Deion Sanders is going to just wave the magic wand and win 10 games. I'm not saying Deion Sanders is going to wave the magic wand and win 6 games. I'm not sure that that's the goal in year one. I'm not sure it's an attainable goal in year one. There are way too many unknowns about the current state of the roster. There are way too many unknowns about the staff that he's put together with Charles Kelly on defense. He's obviously a great recruiter. Sean Lewis on offense. He was a great head coach, did a really nice job at Kent there for a while, but I don't know what they're going to look like. I think Shedeur is a good player, but this is a huge step up in competition. And I really don't know whether or not they're going to win a ton of games in the first year under Deion Sanders. But I can tell you this. What did we say was a guarantee when Deion Sanders took the job? He was going to be front page news. Say what you want about whether or not he wins games in the fall. He's not winning the fall right now. His goal is to win the offseason and to make headlines and to be splashy and to be active on social media and to get front and center with some of the top recruits in the country. Some already committed to Colorado. Some considered Colorado. And ultimately, even though they didn't go there, he was in the mix. Colorado has clearly established that they're going to shoot their shot. Doesn't matter where the guy's at or what the circumstances may be. Guys that would have never in a million years considered Colorado have Colorado in their top 5, top 10, top 8, top 6, however many deep their finalist field of decisions go. As far as their signing, Colorado's in the mix. So while it's yet to be seen what they do on the field, Deion's already accomplishing his job at a crazy high level. He goes viral almost weekly on Twitter. He's been out there in front of so many different recruits, and he's moving the needle. I mean, we're talking about Colorado. You know how many times we talked about Colorado prior to Deion Sanders deciding to take that head job? Maybe like 2 or 3 times. We did 120 shows or so before he took that job. And now we've talked about him 6 or 7 in the last 25 shows. So I think that Deion's doing a heck of a job here early on, but we will find out when the season gets underway whether or not that A remains an A here heading in to year number 1 in Boulder. Let's get to the Bs. Okay, and there's a handful of Bs I might add. I actually thought that this really, for the most part, kind of like what I talked about on Wednesday. I don't know if the ADs are just better informed when it comes to code. Maybe there's just better candidates out there. I don't know what the circumstances are, but it feels like last year's set of coaches that were hired, all for the most part, 9 out of the 27 got A grades for me. Well, so far, out of all the guys in the Power 5, I mean, you got 9 out of 10 in the Power 5. Well, 11 in the Power 5, technically. 9 of the 11 got A's or B's. It's pretty dang impressive when you take that into account. It's almost like these headhunters, if you will, have done a better job of identifying who's going to fit where and what candidates might be able to pull things off at that respective school. Let's start at Auburn. Hugh Freeze gets a B. Why does he get a B? Well, I think Lane Kiffin would have been an A. I'll just say that. So Hugh Freeze, while he's done a decent job on the recruiting trail, I think there's a lot to be excited about. He did a great job at Liberty, won 8 games in each of the last 4 years. He's back in the SEC now, has a familiarity with the league, the footprint, and everything else. I think he's positioned to do well. The one thing I would say, and I do feel like the fan base is behind him, I think that that is very beneficial, of course, right? You got to be able to play politics if you're at Auburn. He's equipped, I think, to rebuild the roster in a way that his fan base will be more comfortable. Now, people have said for a while now, Brian Harsin couldn't recruit. Brian Harsin didn't know what he was doing, didn't have any interest in it. Well, Brian Harsin's first recruiting class finished number 19, according to 247. Well, everyone's telling me that Hugh Freeze is doing an amazing job, and look how great he's recruiting. Well, they're 17. They're 2 spots better than a guy that supposedly couldn't recruit. So I think that that's something that needs to be acknowledged. Like, I'm very optimistic about Hugh Freeze's tenure. I'm curious to see what he goes with. I'm curious to see what he does with Robbie Ashford. I think it's a good hire. I think it's a good fit. I think he knows how to play the game. That is important at a place like Auburn. But ultimately, it's a B at this point because still there were some things that went down at Ole Miss as far as how they played. I'm not talking about everything else. You could talk about all the other stuff, the low-hanging fruit stuff. That's fine. But I'm talking about how they played at times. That left me feeling a little bit less than I wanted to feel. So I'll be curious. I think he's going to do a good job there. I do. Is he ultimately going to win national championships? I don't know. I hope for him, and I hope for his fan base. So he gets a B right now. Like I said, good, solid, very solid B for Hugh Freeze on the Plains. Another B will go just slightly to the east. Brent Key at Georgia Tech. Now, he got the job, of course, After Jeff Collins was fired just 4 games into the season, he went 4-4 as the interim coach and led Georgia Tech into within striking distance of getting to the postseason. I mean, that's pretty amazing. He played at Georgia Tech. He spent 2 different stints on the staff. He's extremely familiar with the program. He knows everything that you need to know about what it takes to be successful at Georgia Tech. And here's why I like it as much as anything. You look down the stretch. Now, they didn't have crazy talent. They didn't have ridiculous personnel. But I'll tell you what, Georgia Tech, under Key's leadership, played their hearts out, pulled off some surprising upsets, did some and won some games that nobody thought they had a chance to win. So I think they overperformed in the 4 games that he won, obviously, as the interim head coach. So having the interim tag removed, now he gets an opportunity to lead his own program. Couldn't be happier for him. He gets a solid B as well. Let's go to Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State. He also gets a B, just 32 years old. Obviously, though, he's familiar. And much like Brent Key, he graduated from Arizona State. He's already been the offensive coordinator at Memphis, at Auburn, at Florida State, and at Oregon. And you look at what he was able to do at Oregon last year in revitalizing Bo Nix's career. Like, if you're a guy that's thinking, man, I need to get a fresh start. Things aren't going great for me. I need to get things going. Well, Kenny Dillingham said, hey, here's what we did with Bo. Here's the blueprint. Why don't you come play at our place? I'll bring out the most in your ability. That would be very advantageous, I think, for guys that might be at a crossroads as far as their career is concerned. So I think he's in a tough spot, though. I think Arizona State's one of those situations where everyone thinks it should be better than it is. So you're almost in a place where it doesn't have a ton of expectations, but oftentimes you fall short of expectations. It's an odd roundabout spot, are the Sun Devils, but I think it's a solid fit. And if he can't invigorate what some have considered to be a long-time sleeping giant, I'm not sure who can. So I'm cautiously optimistic that with his first job, he's going to be able to do just that. He's a B. I think it'd be a spot where it'd be like middle to lower tier B, not because it's not good or anything like that. It's just he's young and it's his first go round. It's a difficult spot to be thrust into your alma mater when you're the head coach for a very first time. It worked out for Kirby Smart, though. Obviously, different side of the ball, but it worked out for him. Hopefully, it will work out for Kenny Dillingham as well. And then finally, the last B that I have, I have 2 more Bs. I thought I had one more. I have 2 more Bs. I'm going to go with Ryan Walters at Purdue. Now, Walters, 36 years old, a little bit like Kenny Dillingham. Young, but was a prime candidate and at Colorado. So Walters was getting a head job. Whether it was at Colorado, and if Deion turned that down, he was going to have another spot. He ended up at Purdue. And Purdue, by the way, you might be surprised to find out that Purdue has deep pockets. You might be surprised that Purdue's commitment to athletics and NIL is significant. So this is actually a better job than I think people realize when it comes to Purdue, especially given the current situation. He was a great coordinator at Illinois, has a strong, deep knowledge of the Big Ten. And I think when you look at it, man, even though most of the best coaches at Purdue have come with an offensive background, I'm not sure it matters anymore. Like, you really look at it, man, you're going to have to score points anyways. So he went out, he hires Graham Harrell. He's going to run the offense. They're going to be just fine. He wanted to get that air raid system, a system that he was very familiar with. So he's still going to be able to put together a great defense. Look what he did at Illinois. But now they're probably going to be able to score points because Graham Harrell traditionally has been pretty good, whether it be at SC or even at times at West Virginia last year. Graham Harrell's done a pretty good job calling plays for whoever it was that he was calling plays for. Moving forward just a little bit, we'll go just a little bit to the east of where, well, just a little bit south or east, whatever. I'm not great geographically. I'm sure that's surprising to you. Scott Satterfield at Cincinnati. He gets a B as well. Now you're going to say, really? A B? Like, that's surprising. I mean, he was disappointing at Louisville. Yes, and that's why he'd be on the lower tier of the B scale with me. But I think things soured with him at Louisville, not because of what happened on the field, but in some ways with what happened off the field. Remember, a lot of people very upset that he decided to interview for the South Carolina job, and it felt like after what was a great first season, things kind of got a little bit trickier after that. He stumbled his way to nearly a 500 record, just 25-24 over the final 3 or over the 4 years that he was there in Louisville, Kentucky. But either way, man, he's taking over as a place that has a very established culture. And granted, yes, it's going to be a little unique knowing that Fickell left for what some around Cincinnati to believe to be a lateral move. Fair or unfair, say what you want. I think it's a step up personally, but Cincinnati doesn't view it that way. I think this is a pretty good situation for Scott Satterfield to step into. Now, I know Cincinnati's in the Big 12. They're not in the group of 5. But you think about that run game and how they can marry up the run game and how he can create some opportunities off play action. Like Scott Satterfield's offense is very difficult to defend. Now, you got to have the pieces in place to be able to run that offense. But either way, I think Cincinnati is a place where that offense can succeed. So very optimistic about that hire. I give it a B, even though it's on the lower end of the Bs when we kind of rank and file all the different coaches. And then finally, just one C in the group, just one. You're going to say, well, really, there's 2 coaches that are remaining that I haven't listed just yet. Zach Arnett is an incomplete grade at this point. Thrust into what was a difficult situation. It's the only decision that Mississippi State could make. Could they have gone out and hired somebody else? Perhaps. But you would have lost what might become a very legit head coach. So I am not going to grade Zach Arnett as of right now. Impossible situation taken over for Coach Mike Leach, but he's done a pretty good job of, I think, bringing in his own pieces. Thought he might go air raid, decided not to. Some of his hires that he's brought in. So we're going to kind of leave that one for the time being. We'll assess it a little bit more after spring when we can kind of see exactly what things look like for their program in 23, because they should have expectations. A lot of guys returning and a lot of talent still on that roster, but he is going to be left with an incomplete grade. The only C that we're giving out right now is Troy Taylor at Stanford. Now you're going to say, Greg, that's harsh, man. I mean, look, give me a break. Like Troy Taylor, what did he do? Like he was 38-4 over the course of 3 seasons as the head coach at Sacramento State and lost only 1 time in the Big Sky Conference. Like, fair enough. I get it. But Stanford has always talked about just how deep their pockets are and how they, have a $1 billion endowment and all these other things, right? Like, we acknowledge that Stanford, obviously the well runs very, very deep as far as what their alumni have made and what their alumni will continue to give back to the university. It's just how much of that goes back to the athletic department. And I feel like there is a constant tug of war between the athletic department and the actual school itself. And that's okay. It's a institute of higher learning. I understand that. But to a certain extent, man, it feels like there have been people that would have taken this job, but they didn't want to pay, at least the people that I talked to, they didn't want to pay what was expected to be able to go out and get the highest candidate possible. Now, Troy Taylor might be great. And look, you're not going to be defined by what you make or what you're paid or all these other things. Like, he's going to have the opportunity to now go earn it, which I totally support and I admire. But it felt like Stanford didn't have the widest net cast when assessing all the different candidates, because it felt like they were a little bit strapped for cash when they looked at some of the possibilities. Either way, Troy Taylor has done a pretty decent job at Sac State. He played at Cal. He understands the area, but he's not a crazy experienced head coach. And to be honest with you, Stanford's probably one of the programs I am most concerned about going forward in the future, because they're not going to play the transfer portal game and they're not going to play the NIL game, or at least it doesn't feel like they're going to at this point. All right, like we try to do several times a week, we're going to get into the mailbag. Hit us up at alwayscollegefootball@gmail.com. Please shoot us a message. Shoot us a note. What do you want us to talk about? You guys are helping us program the show. This is our first time doing it in the off season, so we're leaning on our listeners to be able to kind of tell us where you want us to go. And we've gotten so many responses. We're just continuing to chip away at all those different questions in the mailbag so far. We'll continue to do it again here in the future episodes. So, Coobs, kick it off.
All right, the first one comes from Brett. He asked, why is it so hard to be a really good coach? What makes coaches elite as far as building a program? I hate how often coaches get criticized. This stuff is hard.
Well, I think the biggest thing with coaches is you got to have good players. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, I know that Greg, you're really reinventing the wheel. I get it. Like, I understand that it sounds so obvious, but I think the backbone of every great coach, backbone of every great program is the ability to recruit. I mean, if you can't get guys in the door, if you can't at least figure out a way to get a guy to listen to your message, you got no chance. So you got to be able to recruit. That's number one. Two, you got to be able to identify talent. I think that's the big thing. And it's not just individual players, but I think it's also you got to be able to acknowledge when you might have been wrong about a guy. A lot of guys will make a first impression. Maybe the guy's not playing very well. Maybe he's terrible for a month. And then basically they're in their doghouse forever. You got to be able to adjust and adapt and think, well, keep an open mind as this guy because he might get better over time and become a contributor for you down the road. Three, I think you have to have a clearly established ability to develop guys, knowing how to put them in situations, get a ton of reps out of them, coach them individually on specific techniques they need to put in their own game to make sure they are being able to put their best foot forward technique-wise on a week-to-week basis. I also think, finally, the biggest thing with coaches, you got to get guys to buy in. I mean, buy-in is massive. There are so many times, too, and we never really air it. I mean, we never show guys loafing because it doesn't reflect well on the player and it doesn't reflect well on the coach. But if I had $1 for every time I watched a guy play during a game I'm calling and a guy's not running with 100% speed, guy's not giving great effort, guy's playing out of control and not doing what he needs to do, that's not just a reflection on that individual player. It's also a reflection on the coach. Like, you got to be able to get the most out of your guys. And your guys better play as hard as humanly possible, as often as humanly possible. No, you can't give 100% effort, 85 snaps in the game. It's not going to happen. I wish you could, but it's not going to happen. So I think the guys that always seem to make sure that their players are prepared and the guys that are always making sure that their players are giving 100% effort, those are the guys that I've always felt have kind of separated themselves. So recruiting naturally, development naturally, keeping open mind about certain players from time to time, being able to coach technique and fundamentals and repping those guys like crazy, and then finally making sure that you reach the players and get the players to buy in. Those are the qualities, I think, of the great coaches in our game.
All right, the next one comes from JD. He asks, what are your thoughts on removing bowl games entirely from the new playoff format? Having home field advantage throughout the playoffs till the national championship will be the only way to make the regular season have less of a safety net for the elite teams.
I'm totally supportive of it. I have no issue whatsoever with basically getting rid of bowl games. I have none. I think what makes the games really special, and you see it at the FCS, you see it in Division II and Division III, like home games and home game environments are phenomenal. And I couldn't even imagine how much energy there would be in early January where, say, Ohio State is hosting Georgia there in the shoe as snow is coming down onto the field. Like, that would be phenomenal theater. The problem is it's never going to happen because the bowls hold so much power and the bowls hold so much tradition and the bowls have so much money because they can create so many opportunities. Like, think about how many suites. Like, for instance, if, let's say, Appalachian State were somehow hosting a semifinal game, do they have the infrastructure to be able to handle a game, luxury seating for sponsors and things like that? Like, no. But guess what does? NFL stadiums, which is where all of those venues have. Now, I know you're going to say, well, no NFL team plays in the Rose Bowl. All right. The Rose Bowl is kind of in a league of its own. So just remove the Rose Bowl from your thought process in this regard. Like, they're not going to be able to get rid of that. I think there's too much money being generated by the bowls, and there's too much money that is going back into the college football playoff and ultimately to your favorite team because of the bowls involvement that it won't happen. I wish it would, because I think a home field advantage and a home field environment would be amazing, but I don't think it's going to happen. What I'd like to see is, I know that the semifinals are going to be in bowl sites, whether it be Rose, Sugar, Orange, Fiesta, Cotton, Peach. I know they're going to be in bowl sites. I'm comfortable with that. The national championship, I know, is going to be in a bowl site. I'm comfortable with that. I can live with that. What I'd like to see, though, I'd like to see the first 2 rounds. If they end up going with this 12-team playoff format, I'd like to see the first 2 rounds played in home fields. So that means if you get a bye, you still get to host a home playoff game. I think that'd be a great reward to the fans, to the season ticket holders, and all the people that want to drive right down the street or go to their favorite stadium to support their team in a playoff setting. So I'd like to see the first 2 rounds on campus, but I think that's even a little bit of a long shot at this point. All right, summing everything up today, man. I'm telling you, and I know that maybe I'm just being glass half full. I get it. By the way, you're probably looking at me like, Greg, how could you not assign any of the new coaches in the Power 5 this year an F grade? Because how can you have an F if you haven't taken the test just yet? Like, do you go and tell me this? I don't know. For those of you that are in higher education, if you teach, explain, tell us in the comments. Like, help me understand. Do students start with a 0 and work their way up, or they start at 100 and work their way down? Because I happen to think you start at 100 and work your way down. Like, every single student is passing until they're not. That's the way I look at it. So I think assigning any coach a failing grade prior to their first season is wrong. I mean, I'm going to give every one of these guys the benefit of the doubt right now. Now, like I said, I gave Troy Taylor a C. Why? It's more about Stanford's process than it is about Troy Taylor, to be honest with you. I mean, these things coincide and go hand in hand with one another. I think Troy Taylor might be great. We'll find out. Hope he is. Don't know for sure, but certainly hope he is. Just a matter of whether or not he's going to be in a good position to continue to go out there and give it his all and make sure Stanford doesn't hold him back, because I think Stanford might, if I'm going to be completely honest. So we shall see. I think putting a bow on it, first-year head coaches in the coaching carousel as we kind of close this up, I think these coaches all fit pretty well. I really do. Like, there are some hires I like a little more than others. For instance, Hugh Freeze is an example. I think he's going to be good at Auburn. Yeah, I think he will. I think he's the best possible candidate for Auburn. No, but I still think he's going to be good. That, I think, is a pretty good place to live when taking everything into consideration. So, exciting times on the coaching carousel. We will further evaluate these guys after they kick things off here in the fall. That'll do it for us here.
Hold on. We can't go to break yet. We can't be done with the show. It's Super Bowl weekend. All right. I'm not going to let you get off the hook without making a pick for the Super Bowl. All right. McElroy, so who do you like and why?
I'm taking Kansas City, 27-21, partly because I think everybody is going to talk about the advantage that Philadelphia has at the line of scrimmage on both lines of scrimmage, right? They have a great defensive line. They're phenomenal along the defensive line. They're excellent, amazing along the offensive line. And no one's going to talk about the fact that if you look at Kansas City, what killed them a couple years ago when they played against Tampa Bay, they lost that Super Bowl. Why? Because they couldn't protect Pat Mahomes. Well, what have they done since? They have upgraded across the board along their offensive line, and they still have Chris Jones on defense, who's a complete all-pro game wrecker. They're in the middle of that defense. So I like Kansas City. I'm one of the few. I think that Pat Mahomes is just one of those guys that's so good, you just can't help but be on his side. Even though collectively, roster-wise, it'd be hard to make a case on behalf of the Philadelphia Eagles. So there's my pick. I'm taking Kansas City 27-21 against the Philadelphia Eagles. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Please like, rate, and subscribe. It helps us out. It helps the show out. We continue to look forward to our interactions with you on social media. Always CFB on Twitter and on Instagram, and look forward to interacting with you in our mailbag. So continue to send us your questions. We get them. We're going to use them. We already have used them, and we will continue to check that on a daily basis to make sure the ones that are applicable get into the show. Always collegefootball@gmail.com. So we appreciate you guys so much. For Jack Foster and Mark Kubiak, I'm Greg McElroy. Hope you have a wonderful day, and remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.